And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. We're on this journey of examining our business through the eyes of a potential buyer. This is our third particular episode in this series, and I brought this about because of listening to sellers throughout this last fiscal year as we were helping them try to negotiate and work through this buying strategy and the buying and selling process. And candidly, as I wrote my second book about, your baby's ugly. It feels that way. Even after you sell your business, it's going to feel like you're being attacked, that somebody is coming in and destroying everything that you put your life into. And it's tough. It's tough. So today I want to talk about the eyes of the buyer, what they see as it relates to the assets of our business. Now, of course, they're going to look at the balance sheet, they're going to look at your income statements, and they're going to get an inventory of your assets. I want to go beyond what the academic world looks like, maybe like your accountant would look like, or the negotiator, or the broker. I want to dive into reality. So let's start with facilities. Perhaps you're in a business that's a location facility. Perhaps you're in an office area. You're not working virtual for your business. I visit a lot of our clients and I go to their places of business, and some are, artists and contractors. Maybe they hang blinds or shutters. Maybe they service vehicles. Maybe they work in medicine of some sort, veterinarian, for example. But their customers either come to their location to do business or could potentially come to their location to pay bills, various things of that nature. Maybe it's a manufacturing warehouse to where you actually have equipment in place. Doesn't matter. When the buyer comes to analyze your place of business, they're going to want to look beyond curb appeal. Obviously, we know we want our business to look pretty to the community. We use it as a marketing tool many times, but they want to look beyond how it looks. They want to dive in beyond that. They want to know, does your building meet state and local requirements? Is it functional? Can the building be expanded for additional clientele? Is the building up to code, and is it well maintained? They want to see the details of the company. I was on site about a week ago now, and we were visiting in Lower Alabama this particular company that is that's in the auto repair business. And the building was amazing. It was huge facility. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a facility as large as this for auto and diesel and RV repair. It was quite large. From the outside, it looked dated, and that the business owner already knew we wanted to address some of those things. The inside had lots of room for expansion. As I was looking through this, we were talking about functionality and how to reposition the building slightly for functionality issues. So that's the way your buyer's going to look at your business, look at your actual location. It's far beyond, is it pretty? Far beyond that. They're going to want to know is, who owns the building? Are you renting it? Do you own it? Are you leasing it? Several of our sellers of businesses had leased space. So now the buyer has to decide, are they going to take up that particular lease? The seller has to figure out, are we willing to sell it and continue the lease, or do we want to try to break our lease? There's lots of legalities here when it comes to leasing. The buyer's trying to figure out, is this building, if I sign this lease for an extra 5 years, will this space give us affordability over the next 5 years as we grow this company? Perhaps you own the building. You own your location, your facility. Are you willing to sell it to the buyer? If not, are you willing to lease it? And if you lease it, how are you going to negotiate that lease? So beyond the facade or the look of the building or the facility, they're going to dive into some details. And perhaps most importantly is location still matters. In real estate, they say location, location, location. And that is true as it relates to the facility. The buyer is coming to see, will this location afford me the growth that I need or the maintenance of the particular revenue that we need for X number of years? Or will we need to relocate because a competitor has moved real close, or because there's opportunities in another location near yours? They're going to look at that. How is transportation movement? Ingress, egress is what we often say. the buyer is going to be looking at a lot of these different points, not just is the paint pretty and the landscaping pretty. So the facilities matter. Another thing that matters from the buyer's perspective is your fixed assets. I wrote about this in my book, Your Baby's Ugly. And I talk about the tale of two companies. Both of these companies have similar revenue. Both of them have similar locations, and they're in the same business SIC code. So they're competitors for each other. Company A has dated equipment. It's very poorly maintained. It has a rundown fleet of vehicles. Whereas Company B has a well-maintained fleet of vehicles. The equipment is maintained properly, and it is state-of-the-art. So if both companies have the same revenue, both are similar locations, which company would you as a buyer choose to purchase? Well, obviously, you'd want the one that's up to date, that's been maintained, that the owners appear to take pride in their overall operations, not just the bottom line. So the buyer is going to be looking at your assets and saying, which pool of assets compared to this individual company's competitors provides us the greatest opportunities. There's this concept that I often run into with us business owners, and we want to be the best. We want to be the best. I can remember building my house, all the different sales pitches. This is the best gutter. These are the best windows. This is the best floor. This is the best insulation. This is the best, and it keeps on going and going and going. And candidly, when you start putting all those best of the best prices together, you end up building a house that no one can afford. No one can afford the best of everything. Now, perhaps you're in a subsect, small area of the country to where everything matches that. Well, that's a different strategy than what I'm talking about. But for the average Joe in the average American neighborhood with 2 million or less houses, chances are you don't have the best of everything. Chances are. Guys, I've been in $5, $10, $20 million houses, and even in those houses, the best of the best of the best ends up pricing that house far above it's often neighbors within its particular area of locale. But we business owners think oftentimes we have to have the best of everything. Let me challenge you. Instead of thinking about the best, think about the potential value that can be gained or lost by neglecting or overlooking your fixed assets. Sure, there may be a time that you need to upgrade your computers. We have a computer that runs this particular software as I'm recording this. That's a quite pricey computer. I mean, I could buy a car for the price of this computer. It's very pricey. It does its thing. There's a time for that. Whereas the computer that I work off of day in, day out is nowhere near. I mean, only a tenth of the price of this computer here. There's a time to have the best of the best. Then there's times that you don't have to have the best of the best. You can look at the potential value by buying an adequate yet inferior, candidly, to the best of the best asset. Business assets can be used to leverage structure. As you're negotiating, you can actually use the assets to structure the purchase or the funding or the arrangements. So the buyer's going to be looking at the assets of your business. They are. Another thing they're going to look at is your technologies. Are your technologies up to date? Are they sustainable? Are they stable? Do they provide profitability? Are your computers up to date? In my world where we have computers everywhere, if the computers are not up to date, then the buyers are going to end up discounting the equipment portion of your purchase. On the other hand, if you're running inferior softwares through your technologies, things that are so subpar that no one could scale a business from them, it's going to affect the value of your company. Oppositely, if you have state-of-the-art software and the software meets and is capable of expanding as the industry that you're in evolves or continues to evolve, the buyer is going to realize they're not going to have as much infrastructure cost in upgrading technologies, and therefore, again, your value is going to be affected. Oftentimes, buyers will choose to put their monies into technologies that can give them a critical advantage over their competitors. So if you're the seller, if you own the business, what is that? Can you go ahead and implement your company? Can you use an investment of dollars back into the company that helps you shore up the technologies so that in a year or 2 or 3 or 4, when the buyers come in, they're not having to do an overhaul on the technologies of your company? In addition to technologies, they're going to look at your digital footprint. Do you have a website? Is it functional? Is it direct? Does it provide a clear representation of what you do? Does it allow capabilities or KPIs for the buyers to see the inflow of marketing leads as a result of your marketing plan? These are all strategies that come with your assets. Now, you may or may not realize that a website is an asset. It actually goes on your balance sheet. Maybe you do. They're going to be looking at that. They're going to dive in and look at every page of the website and see if it's functional. Another area the buyer is going to look at is risk mitigation or risk management. Are there significant barriers to entry within your industry? That's a risk mitigation issue. I often speak about my landscape days, and whenever my brother and I was 15, he was, I think, 13 or 12, and my mom would drive us around. She was teaching us how to work. And with our little snapper lawnmower and our Shindawa weed eaters, we stole, candidly, a lot of yard work from big business. We knew how to work. We could do a good, honest day's work for much less cost than the big companies could afford. They had crews. They had various insurances to provide. We didn't have that. It was just a mom and 2 boys, and she was teaching us how to work, and people saw the value. And so there was a low barrier to entry within that particular industry. On the other hand, perhaps you're in an industry that is well regulated, that has to have credentials, high education that not just anybody can do. That's a risk mitigation issue. The higher the barrier to entry within your business or your field, the higher the price. The lower the barrier to entry, the more the risk. They're going to look at your barriers to entry. They're also going to look at litigation issues. Is there a history of litigation involving your company? Is a company constantly in legal battles? Now, for some businesses or some industries, this is par for the course. But others, lawsuits should never really hit the business. Are you in the midst of a lawsuit? Are there pending issues that could bring about legal battles? Do you have attorneys that have reviewed the contracts to make sure that if they take this over, they're not going to have quality control issues that could create legal issues? That's risk mitigation. Obviously, they're going to look at your taxes. Are you up to date on your state and local taxes? How about your payroll tax? How about your sales tax? I can remember when I bought one company, I can remember buying it, and shortly after I bought it, I didn't realize this, but the sellers had not paid the unemployment taxes for the last payroll. Didn't know anything about it. I bought the company. Ended up getting a fine from the state because the sellers of the company, and they didn't mean it. It was an accident. They actually gave me the money when I approached them with it to pay the taxes. It just happened. That was an honest mistake. Honest mistakes happen. But your buyers are going to look at your taxes. Are you up to date with state and federal taxes? Are you up to date with environmental regulations? Oh man, imagine having the EPA breathe down your neck for something that the sellers of the company that you just bought did, that you had no idea about. This is what I often call skeletons in the closet. I had a client years ago that bought a gas station, and we tried to get them not to buy the gas station. They did nonetheless. They didn't realize that the tanks were leaking, and the EPA was going to shut them down, their new business, unless they replaced the tanks. Now, due diligence did not show it. It could have, perhaps, if they had better representation, but nonetheless, it was an issue that the Environmental Protection Agency could have shut the business down, all because there was a risk involving environmental issues. And you also have OSHA. OSHA, the Safety Board of OSHA is wanting to make sure that your company is not in violations, that the reviews that is done or the audits is done through the inspections prove that the company is acting and participating to the guidelines that OSHA sets forth. The buyer's going to be looking at this. So friends, little things matter from a buyer's eyes. Another thing the buyer's going to look at is your insurance protection and your intangible properties protection. Candidly, and I'm being fully transparent, whenever somebody engages us, if I'm working on the case, I can look at their insurance portfolio and just by looking at the insurance portfolio, know whether or not the business is a sellable asset, just based on a few things. So the buyer's going to be doing the same thing. They're going to see, are you underinsured? If you're underinsured, it shows that you're often risky, or you're not as risk averse as you should be. And if you're underinsured, what other areas have you not buttoned up? But if I see adequate coverage, the coverage to protect the business, it makes me know that the business owner has done the basics to keep the business sustainable through whatever might come their way. They're going to want to look at your insurance. They're also going to want to look at the intangible properties, things like IP, intellectual property. Have you put patents and trademarks and copyright in place, and your intellectual property is fully protected, or as protected as it could be? The buyers are going to want to see this. I love watching Shark Tank. And if you ever watch Shark Tank, whenever someone says we have a patent, not a patent pending, but a patent, watch the sharks. They sit up straight in their chair. They realize, oh my goodness, this person has their act together. Before they got ready to sell, they already had all their IP protected. If somebody's willing to go through the IP protection, then you pretty much can assert or ascertain or with a reasonable assurance bet that other areas of their business from a risk mitigation standpoint is taken care of. So friends, the buyer, sure, they're going to look at your finances. They're going to look at your operations manuals, but they're going to look at so much more. And we've covered over these last 3 episodes things that I've noticed buyers hone in on just in this last year. And if you as a seller are not ready for these things and have not prepared your business for this type of analysis, then friends, you may leave some cash on the table, unwillingly or unknowingly. And this is why we recommend working with business advisors who deal with this day in, day out, who can help you and challenge you and help your business become best in class. Friends, I realize life is hard. It is. It is. Life is hard, but life is good. We are blessed. And it can be frustrating, but it doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all make it a great day.